Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Today, there was another hearing. I was going to say broadcast. There was another hearing in the Bryan Kohberger case, another pretrial hearing that was an extension of what has been going on in the Bryan Kohberger hearings up to this point in the last few days, which was some suppression motions, possibility of a Frank's hearing, and and some of the way that, you know, the warrants were gathered, if they were gathered correctly or not correctly, yada, yada, yada. Well, we'll be getting into all that. You know, I watched it. I wrote down a lot of things that I found interesting in the trial today, or in the hearing. And so I'll break down what it is that they were talking about and whatnot. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. And with all that being said, let's get into it. What's up, everybody? All righty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to not show the hearing itself, but show the hearing itself. I'm just not, there's going to be no audio. It's just something so you guys can see what I'm talking about at the same time. So initially, day 2 started with the defense coming out, and they had Detective Payne come onto the stand, who I had told you guys was one of the witnesses that was subpoenaed. Ended up being true. It was going to be him, Detective Lawrence Maury as well. And there's going to be some other folks that are going to end up being subpoenaed that we've gotten word of. Now, it wasn't too far into it when I kind of figured out who that was going to be. Now, we've got a poll going on in the live chat of who you think it may be, the out-of-state witness that would be testifying on behalf of the state. So just to kind of tell you guys what the options are, we have, you know, right now leading is Bethany or Dylan at 54%. Confidential informant is at 16%. The Kohberger family member, or a Kohberger family member, at 24%. And other at 5%. And so we'll close this down a little bit closer towards the end. And so and we'll be able to, and then you guys will give me your 2 cents into it, and we'll discuss who it may be. All righty. So let's talk about this. So the arguments here again to start off have been, you know, when did they start, or when did they figure out who Bryan Kohberger is? The defense has been going on and on and on, and this has been going on for over a year, that the prosecution and law enforcement didn't find out who Bryan Kohberger was until after the IGG was completed. Today we heard basically that the prosecution admit that was basically kind of true, but that there's other ways of getting a warrants for certain things. And we've heard that even from the judge. You know, the judge mentioned in the last couple of days that there was a situation where and I think it may have been today. No, actually it was yesterday, where he said when they were trying to argue about some of the DNA and this and a third, or not the DNA, but the warrants themselves. And then the judge goes on to say, well, doesn't the match from DNA trump the rest of it? Like, okay, let's just say you're right about this or right about that or right about that. Doesn't the fact that you have a DNA match from a trash pool which is legal. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. Wouldn't that give you the probable cause to receive or to go in and get the rest of it? And the answer is yes. Yeah, I've said this multiple times. I've I've explained that. I was like, hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that was what I was referring to. All righty. So the next thing that they were trying to argue was that the affidavit for probable cause wasn't necessarily placed on all of the documents, and that their complaint was that there was a group of individuals who who made up the PCA per se, and then there were some documents that had the PCA and there would had the reasons why, and then some documents that just said that upon knowing or duty upon oath and some other words like that, right? And so they were arguing that because they didn't write out everything on every single document, that those documents and those warrants should be waived or inadmissible. And then the next argument also was that they were too broad and generic, which I'll be honest with you guys. I said that in the beginning. One of the reasons why I wasn't so confident in the warrants was because of how broad it was. You know, there wasn't really much to connect them there. Now, they needed a way to come up with probable cause. Now, I mentioned, you know, the story that I've mentioned before where we had somebody who we thought was selling some narcotics out of their home and in parties. And what we did was we would wait for him to host these parties. And then where people were leaving, you know, we targeted certain people on certain nights. Like we would target a car that would show up just briefly and leave, those type of things. And it wouldn't be every time they had a party. And this investigation went on for some time, but we ended up getting the probable cause that we needed based on pulling over those vehicles with the drivers inside the vehicles telling us what they purchased and where they purchased and how much and et cetera, et cetera. And so we had a CI that wasn't going to testify and basically told us that this person is selling drugs there. And we were able to get probable cause and get everything else and build a case against that person. Now, I know some people are going to ask, well, why didn't they do something similar to Bryan Kohberger? Well, one, you're trying to get the guy off the street, right? You know, you have to factor in the nature of the crime. You know, the person that we were building a case on was somebody who was selling, you know, narcotics out of their home. The person these guys were trying to arrest is a quadruple homicide suspect. So it's completely two different things. You're going to try to get that guy off the street as fast as possible. And so, you know, could they have waited a little bit longer, perhaps to get something else more concrete, maybe? But to be honest with you, like when it came to the probable cause, all they needed to really put in there was, you know, we had the vehicle that was around there. We had a vehicle that matched Bryan Kohberger's, and we had DNA on the sheath, and that was it. I mean, had they not put in anything else and everything else, I mean, I guess you can put in Dylan's statement or whatever, but even at that, that's not really needed for probable cause. I mean, you can use the download of the victim's phones, and maybe you can use that aspect that there were some surviving victims in the home. They stated that they had initiated their phone at some point after they heard something, and we were able to do a download of that phone. And that time that phone was turned on was this time. You had the video with the audio of the dog barking and all the other stuff going on. You have all those things taking place, yet, gosh, man, I forgot I was going into too far of an explanation there. I forgot where I was going with it. But let me see, where was I at? Well, yeah, well, anyways, they were just arguing about how, oh, there we go. I remember now. So they were arguing, all they needed to do was just argue the time, right? They didn't need to go into everything else. They could have also just said a series of camera images and photos is what they did to determine the year, make, and model of the car. They didn't have to go into the effect that they believed it was a 2011 13 and then later changed it. All of that is for like trial and for these preliminary hearings, that wasn't for the PCA. You know, I think it was a little bit too much detail. 19 pages is quite a bit, you know, and so it was a little bit too detailed in my opinion, especially for what they had at the moment. And you know, I just think that, like, even at that time when it came out, I was a little bit concerned about it because it was kind of confusing. It took, you know, I had to read it a couple of times for me to understand it. I'm sure most people had to read it a couple of times for them to understand it. You know, there was the basics, right? You had a guy who left his DNA. You didn't really understand what they were trying to say when they said that he could have left and could have gone this way or that way or this way, and there's a little bit of contradictions here or there, and it was a little bit confusing. And then you get in it and you start to realize what they're trying to say, and it seems like that PCA was written with somebody who had a lot of information and just couldn't get it out in the right way. You know what I'm saying? Like I've struggled with that here on the show before, where I have so much stuff to cover. I get rambled. I start going in and out, start going from one place to another, this, that, and the third. And I feel like that's kind of how that PCA felt as well. It doesn't mean that anything or everything that they said was inaccurate or wrong. It just means that they probably rushed it a little bit, but they were trying to get somebody off the streets. We found out a little bit about what he was doing in his home when he was getting arrested, and that there may have been reason why they wanted to get him off the streets as fast as they did. We'll see. All righty. So to me, I just felt like the fact that they wanted all that stuff added onto the PC. I mean, they wanted basically the 19-page PCA on every piece of element. And the other argument was, so their point of view was that they felt it was really generic, right? That when they went in from one warrant to another, they either didn't ask for anything or they used the same warrant over and over again. I mean, not the same warrant, the same affidavit. I apologize. They used the same affidavit over and over again. They didn't generalize it. They didn't specify it, which I think was inaccurate. You know, when they said that about the cell tower pings and when they got, you know, what information and whatnot when it came to his locations and the locations beforehand, you know, all that stuff was, you know, they complained that the timingness in it, that it only took 1 hour to get one of the reports back. And from within that 1 hour, you had enough evidence to ask for a second warrant. You know, I get it. You know, you want them to say in there, hey, you know, we saw this, and this in this warrant, instead of giving them the same warrant that they had, or the same affidavit that they had for the earlier one. But it still works. You know, I mean, you may not like it. You may want some more specificity, but, or specificness to it. But, and at a certain point, there probably should be a little bit more. You know, it should say, hey, you know, after we got this piece of information, well, then again, I mean, when they got his pins for that night, you're gonna be able to see that there was a large piece of time missing, and that large piece of time missing is around the time that the murders happened. So it may not take a lot for it to actually get to that point, to be like, all right, this guy's missing some time. We want to look at the rest. And they were both also in the same room when it came to Detective Maury and Nick Valance of the FBI, who was doing the cast stuff. So and down the street or down the hall, I'm sorry, was Detective Payne. They were all in the same building. So now that I think about it, I don't think it's very unlogical that would happen. You know, I think they even use the term, because in some of the stuff that they were arguing, the judge came back and said, like, hey, when they were referring to like expert testimony about what they were going to do, or what they were going to say, there was some times where the judge was like, hold on, what did he say? How did he say it? I have it written down. I'm just, here you go. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm jumping around myself. So let me get there when I get there. So yeah, they were debating which warrant came first. Then they talked about a tablet in plain sharing, an Apple account, and an Apple receipt, and that this was out of the search of the vehicle. We found out also that the vehicle was indeed in the garage at the time of Kohberger's arrest. And we also found out that Detective Payne arrived at in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania on the 29th at 7 p.m. He waited at the police station for Bryan Kohberger's arrival. And he never went to, he never was at the house, and he never was around the home, in or around the home, the BK or the Kohberger residence. Payne witnessed the Miranda rights by Detective Gilbertson. My handwriting is not the best. I apologize, guys. And had a recorder in his pocket, or the detective had a recorder in his pocket, and he had no idea about any recorders in the Bryan Kohberger home. Car was in the garage, and an iPad and a receipt found in the car that seemed of some sort of importance. What kind of importance can an Apple device that they found a receipt for and the device itself in the car? So I often had, no, this is just me speculating, but I had often thought that maybe perhaps, and this is also around the time, by the way, guys, hint, hint, when I kind of figured out myself personally who I think the out-of-state witness was around this time. Well, anyways, if there's an iPad or an iPad receipt that's in the vehicle and it's some sort of importance, is it possible that this may have been some sort of, well, I would have said burner device or something, but according to Ann and the defense team, it doesn't appear that they found a connection to Bryan Kohberger and the victims. So I'm not sure if this would be a burner phone that had any plans or a manifesto or a list of things that he needed to get to complete his offense. I wonder what it was for. I could think maybe perhaps it was used to purchase things off online, so that way it wouldn't. Him thinking if it was just some random iPad that he purchased, that it wouldn't trace back to him. I have no idea. That's a good one. The judge had asked at this point, because remember how I was mentioning that there was an argument that there was a lot of persons, and including the judge, if they had access, if the affidavit was accessible by the other parties within the investigation. And at this point, they said, yes, it was. At this point, it appeared that the Bryan Kohberger defense team kind of got a little bit upset about that. And then I put on here, they got mad, and it says, all comes down to they didn't attach affidavit, which is for the collective. So they had some affidavits put together, but everybody had access to it. And it seemed like the defense got upset about that. All righty, let's see. The next detective that was up was Detective Maury. His role was digital evidence and was in the same room as Balance. He mentioned that a copy of a cell phone, Bryan Kohberger's cell phone, was made and put onto a USB. Maury said it was not searched until after the warrant was done with by him, and it was a Cellbrite product. So basically, from what I could gather, is the defense was trying to indicate that perhaps somebody had extracted the information of Bryan Kohberger's phone, put it on the USB. But they thought that maybe perhaps somebody went through that phone before the warrant was cleared to go through that phone. And Maury shuts that down, saying no, it was him who went through it. It wasn't somebody else, because she was kind of trying to see or kind of get around to maybe somebody else had looked through it before it got to him, and he was able to shut that down and say no, it wasn't, and it wasn't until he got the warrant. And so that was that part of it. And then they were talking about some Amazon accounts, which I think they gave up some information a lot later in the hearing. In fact, in the second part of the hearing, Jay Loxon mentioned something about an Amazon purchase, which was interesting. I wonder what he was purchasing from Amazon. That would have been, I mean, these are all items that are going to be used in court. These are items that they're trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? They're trying to keep them out of court. So these aren't going to be things that are going to be in the favor of the defense. So there was a Amazon purchase that is something that they don't want out. You know, a lot of rumors have been speculated about the knife sheath or the knife being purchased off of Amazon. You know, but it could be other things. It could be a backpack. It could be some Vans shoes. It could be, you know, a lot of other things that could have been implied or used in the mapping. Somebody said mapping here. Tim, how's it going, my man? Let's see. Okay. Then they were talking about some of the email address, right? And the email address that came into concern, and this is the one that sort of confuses me a little bit, because the email address on the Instagram account that was following the couple of the victims had the DeSales email address that they're arguing here that law enforcement had no authority going into, because it wasn't a personal account. It was an account from the school, and they should have had a warrant for the school, this, that, and a third. And to a point, I guess I understand their argument. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to go anywhere. I do think that the prosecution ended up saying something to the effect that they did get a warrant. They were just waiting on a warrant from the information. They served the warrant. They're just waiting from DeSales or something to that nature. So I'd have to go back and check that part back out. But yeah, they were arguing about the DeSales being private school educated, and that the law enforcement had no right going into his email address or email stuff. Alrighty. And then they talked. So last time, which was yesterday, there was Anne brought up something about about Bryan Kohberger in a 2001 report that had just recently shown up. She said, I hadn't looked at it, blah, blah, blah. She's lying, for one. She's lying. She knows what it is. Everybody knows what it is. That was the one where these one girl said that this at 3 a.m., some guy who was shorter attempted to break into their house. He had a knife. She kicked him. He ran off. And then lo and behold, Bryan Kohberger's name was listed. One of their arguments was that the defense was saying today was that they were going back onto the DeSales email address to figure out his schedule, or to figure out where he was, or if he would have been in Idaho in 2021. And so what they're going to try to indicate is, or what they're saying is, that the reason why those warrants on Bryan Kohberger's stuff, and even on the victims, stuff, to ensure that maybe perhaps that wasn't when he came in contact with him, that he wasn't in town that time, that it wasn't him that was involved in that 2021 incident involving another person who had a knife and entered another property with some sorority females. So that's why those warrants were extended. And remember, everybody was like, I wonder why they're doing it. Why are they going so far back? And I even remember Ann Taylor bringing up that question. And then here recently we find out about this. And, I kind of question how it was found. Like, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but like, if the defense mentions this a while back, right? Like, why are you doing this? And they did it with an attitude. I remember, everything that Ann Taylor does has an attitude, but she did it with a little bit of an attitude, like, why are they looking so far back? Right. I think she knew. I think she had all the information there. And for somebody to figure that out, like, how would they know that Bryan Kohberger's name was on some random incident report? Now, I guess maybe somebody can do a search via just his name, but I'm not sure if that would have been open like that. You know, time, place, incident number, you know, victim name, those type of things are some of the other things that you need to pick up an incident report. I'm just wondering if she leaked that out somehow. That's just my thoughts. Maybe she leaked that information out so that everybody can go find it, so that everybody can say, hey, look, he wasn't the guy then, so he may not be the guy now, right? And that's what they're going to try to say and try to make you guys and everybody else look past the fact that his DNA is there. A vehicle was a card matching a description of his is outside, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, let's continue this. So yeah, I strongly believe that whole the warrants extending back to January 2021 were to ensure and find out if Bryan Kohberger had gone back or had gone to Idaho at that time, was in Idaho at that time, maybe got in contact with some of the victims, maybe crossed paths with them back then at some point. They ended up having a break, and then they come back and they do their arguments. The first argument is that warrants, and this is from the defense, she said, warrants aren't broad. You can't seize a haystack to find a needle. But that's not true. You can. You absolutely can. Like, if you have evidence that somebody has let's look at P. Diddy, right? That's a case going on right now. Did y'all see his house after they were looking for videotapes? Now, that's a big old haystack on its own right there, that mansion. And they ripped into everything. And they have the right to look into everything, you know, to find something. Now, for instance, if you're looking for, let's just say you're looking for some specifics, right? And let's say you're looking for a 6-foot ladder. Well, then you can't be looking into drawers, right? But that's not the case. You know, they were looking for tapes, so they can look into drawers. They can look into those type of things. And, you know, when it came to Bryan Kohberger and the warrants and everything else, I mean, it was to his DNA, which is one of the smallest things that's out there. It's his information, what he was doing, you know, and they weren't really not that specified. I mean, they were specified. Like, for instance, when it came down to the phone usage, that initially was specified to a specific hour, right? It was that day, 24 hours or 12 hours before and after, however they did it, of when the incident occurred. And then they wanted to go back X amount of weeks because maybe perhaps the perpetrator had gone and didn't, you know, turn off his phone, had his phone with him, which I know a lot of people are saying, like, well, you know, his phone doesn't put him there. His phone don't put him there. He's not parked up there, blah, 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 blah. Well, it does put him in the town of Moscow 12 different times. It may not show him stationary there or those type of things, but just because there's not proof of it doesn't mean he didn't do it. You know, you can't use it. You know, there's a difference between what you know and what you can prove. You know, I can know something. We can know that, you know, there's a good chance that he would probably go by there with his phone off and watch, or maybe even had attempted this in the past, which if he had, he probably would have turned his phone off then too, right? This probably wouldn't have been the first time he turns off his phone. So, you know, if you're finding that out, then, you know, I just think that when it comes to this about the warrant stuff and it being a needle in a haystack, I just think it's bull crap. And then they were talking about not adding Exhibit A to all the warrants. That was another argument, is that they didn't attach Exhibit A to all the warrants. The 1 hour for broad warrant. There was a broad warrant, 1 hour. So basically, she was complaining about the fact that it only took 1 hour to get the go from the 24-hour time frame to the month time frame afterwards to try to figure something out. And they felt that they got this all done and taken care of too quickly, right? Because all this was in the probable cause affidavit, right? And obviously they got some things wrong. Well, maybe not wrong, but inaccurate. They mentioned that Bryan Kohberger goes to Moscow 12 times, in the months preceding the incident. And that would make you believe that he was passing by the home. I mean, that's what I thought too. So now it doesn't say that he was in front of the home. It doesn't say that he parked there or drove by. It just said that he connected to the towers that would connect to, that the home would have been connected to, which could have been anywhere in Moscow, which also brings up the question or the answer, because Ann Taylor wants to use that and say, well, that could have been anywhere. However, when she's complaining about the travel of Bryan Kohberger through Pullman, she's saying, well, you have it set at one time that he's at home, and then you have it set at another time where he's moving and it's not moving, or it's at a different time. And that's not what the PCA says. The PCA says that at 2:42 a.m., Bryan Kohberger was connected to a tower that would have given service to his home. Doesn't mean that he was home. It just means he was in the vicinity of his home. He may have left, but he was still within the tower that was connected to his home. Same as, well, in Moscow, he may not be at the victim's house. He may just be in the town. That's what that references to. So I wanted to add that. They thought that the 12 previous passes, that didn't happen. And, it does make this case a little bit, it's going to make this case harder, in my opinion. I'm not saying that I think there's quite a bit to prove that he's guilty, and he's going to get found guilty. But, never being there, never following them online, which I find hard to believe, because there's picture evidence of his Instagram, unless somebody hacked into his Instagram before he got arrested, because this was information that was there before his arrest, and started following them, or I have no idea. It seems like the Garrett connection is there. It seems like the pictures were there from screenshots from an account that was associated with the email that is Bryan Kohberger's. That is the one that's in question here in court about the police's right to go through it. So I don't know. I think I think that's going to be, like, if I had to say what are going to be some of the things that the jury's going to have a problem with, I think that one might be it. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, what about the no blood in the car? Well, you got to, words matter, right? And so if you listen to what she says there's no blood here, no blood there. And then this was yesterday. Then she goes, there's no DNA. And then she stops herself. And every time she mentions DNA in the car, in the apartment, or in the house, she uses the term lack of DNA. She didn't even use the term total lack. She said lack of. There's a lack of DNA in the car, lack of DNA there, lack of DNA this way. And then she says there's no connection anywhere. It's so, like, her voice, her words are odd. Now, I would have taken the lack of DNA as a nothing burger, as, as, hey, man, she already said there's no connection and there's no blood, but she said there's no DNA and then stopped. Had she not done that, I would have been like, okay. But now that tells me there's something in the car. There's something in the apartment. I don't know. It's interesting. Then again, there was a time, and we'll go over it, where Jay Logston said something, and Hipler fought back. I mean, to me, I'll be honest with you, there's times where Hipler's acting like he's like holding the hand of the prosecution, especially with Ashley Jennings, on like what to say or do. And it's not something that's wrong or improper or whatever the case may be. It just kind of shows that I'm a little bit concerned also, and maybe one person on the prosecution just not looking good. You know what I mean? Not saying that she's not qualified or any of those things whatsoever. Just that her performance, in the courtroom hasn't been the greatest. And today with Massoff, it didn't seem like she seemed like she was all over the place also. Let's see. And then her question was, who was evaluating what data? Ashley Jennings then came on. She spoke about the specificness on the ATT warrants, about how there was some dates and times. In fact, this time around, I'll be honest with you, she didn't seem too bad. This is just yesterday's, court appearance that it just didn't flow right for me. And then Jay Logden comes on and he admits that there's a purchase of Amazon. He says that there's a purchase. And then they go into, because what he does is he talks about the privacy of purchasing an item in the store versus purchasing an item in Amazon. Now, what their biggest complaint is that it's different, right? That you expect some privacy by being in your home, but it's not. They didn't. The warrant wasn't for Bryan Kohberger's Amazon account. It was for Amazon's business records, right? Now, maybe they did have a warrant for Bryan Kohberger's Amazon account, but that was well after. This is before they found out who Bryan Kohberger was, which, here's the thing. If they're looking at Amazon's business records and not Bryan Kohberger's actual account, that mean that something came back there, right? That something came back on those warrants. Huh. Because we know that they did a warrant and they were doing warrants and they had the specific K-bar knife and K-bar knife sheath, yada, yada, yada. And then they did a pool. And I remember seeing that there was something about X amount of people that had it. Some people were here and there. Maybe perhaps if Bryan Kohberger, and this is my speculation, if Bryan Kohberger went out there and created some sort of fake profile on an Apple tablet there, or an iPad, I'm sorry, purchase some items off of Amazon, off of this iPad, with a fake name. And that might be what they were searching for in the warrants. Cause like they were looking for specific things in those business record warrants, right? It's not like they were looking for people that were buying, jump ropes. They're looking for people that were buying K-bar knives and knife sheaths. Right. So, and different types of knives. And so if they were looking specifically for that and they found something that maybe after the fact tied them into Kohberger, maybe that's the connection there. Like, for instance, let's just say Bryan Kohberger created a fake person, right? Username, the way he spells it, all weird. And he goes and gets a gift card or something, right? Goes on Amazon with his gift card, purchases the K-bar knife and sends it to a random place that he's going to be able to go and collect it from. Well, that purchase may be on that list of names of that the Amazon warrant was looking for. Now, since it doesn't go back or doesn't say Bryan Kohberger or any of those things, and there's a few within the list, right? Remember all the list of the cars that they had, and it took them a little bit to find the right, to get to Bryan Kohberger's for one. And then once they did get to it, it took them time to actually go through it and find it. And the only reason they did was because of the IGG. Well, anyways, similar to that, there's probably a long list of people who had purchased the K-bar knife. And what they probably did then is once they got into his Apple ID and his accounts and stuff like that, they could have then found an account, right? And that account may be linked up to that initial Amazon search warrant that was looking for specifics at K-bar knives. That's just my speculation, kind of putting things together. Don't take it as fact, but there it is. All righty. So the other thing that we figured out was that there was no interrogation or no need for Miranda. So Thompson came up there and he was just kind of boom breaking it all down, right? And he said that when it came to the Miranda part and any statements or whatever, there was no need. There was no interrogation. When for the words that maybe Bryan Kohberger may have spoke before he was Mirandized. So when somebody gets arrested, because of TV, everybody thinks that the moment you get arrested and you get handcuffed, that somebody's going to be like, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can. No, that's not true. Like, I had to carry my Miranda warning in my pocket because it was so rare that I ever used it. You know what I mean? Now, if I was doing like like one of the bigger cases and we've been working on it or whatever, but when I was working just as a beat officer, everything that I did for arrest was like in my presence or view, right? I was called out to places. I went out there, I saw something, or I was operating my motor vehicle and I saw something happen, yada, 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 right? So when I arrested folks, the evidence I had was on my recorder, my witness statement of me that happened in my presence and view. So I didn't really need like statements or those type of things. Very rarely did I do that in my career. And so majority of my arrests, I want to say like 95% of them were, all right, you're under arrest, let's go. And then there was no need to interrogate them. And I never Mirandized them. And I heard him say, like, there were times where I would hear him, when we'd give them their phone call to call the bail bondsman, and the bail bondsman would put on three-way their loved one. And they're talking about how they're going to get out of jail or whatever the case may be. And they're factoring the 10% or whatever. And I'll hear the suspect tell the loved one, they didn't tell me my Miranda rights, so I'm going to get off on this. I'm just like, yeah, buddy, we'll see. Nobody did. But that's just a little personal story. All right, let's go back into this. Oh, and I'm going to say this too. I kind of found out a little bit that perhaps one of the IgG databases that the FBI used, which is one of the ones that is in question, is a place called Heritage. Apparently Heritage doesn't have they have some sort of agreement about law enforcement and this, that, and the third, but they also have in their terms of service that if there's some sort of criminal investigation, not a civil one, but a criminal one, then there's like some sort of loophole that law enforcement can look at it. So just to put that there. Alrighty. So then they talk about the motion to compel by the defense. Ann Taylor comes up and begins to question about, man, I don't remember what she was questioning. Hold on. Oh yeah. So the motion to compel, the defense wanted to get some more information from the prosecution. The judge flat out stopped her and said, hey, what's the framework, behind what you're wanting, right? Like, it sounds like she wants the judge to tell the prosecution to tell her what they're going to do, give them the work. And he said, I can't do that, And then at the same time, though, he also did say that he would advise for more openness. And if there's some things that need to be disclosed, to disclose them. And I think he was being very firm-handed and strict towards the prosecution at that moment, which I hope they take that. And I hope they go with it and they understand that they need to, be as open as possible at this point. It's a slam dunk case against them. You got his DNA, you got his vehicle outside, you have him without an alibi, him with his phone off during that specific time. It's a slam dunk. And there's more evidence that's there that we don't even know about. Right? Don't put yourself behind the eight ball. And I think that's what the judge was saying as well. Don't find yourself in trouble. And he was referring to, like, for instance, like a DNA presentation, and he was referring it to both. He said, if you're going to do a presentation about what DNA is, you better have a disclosure about reports and things of that nature. And it felt like he was directing that to the prosecution. And so at this point, just kind of how yesterday Ashley Jennings was talking about things in her response, and the judge was like, hey, I can't do that, because if you keep telling me things about things in your response and not about things that were available at the time, then I'm going to have to grant them a Frank's hearing, a full one, not off of any merit of anything that they're saying, but solely based on the fact that Jennings couldn't explain what she was trying to explain, which could have been done very easily. I spoke with some folks after the fact, to a lot of folks, including some former lawyers, and they were disappointed in what they saw. And so, well, actually, one's a current lawyer, and they were disappointed in what they saw. It's just like, I felt like even the judge yesterday was kind of like, look, like, what are you doing? He even said that, I can anticipate some of the questions, and he even looked at the defense and say, you might be want to get ready for rebuttal, or whatever the case may have been, something like that. Like, he had an idea of what the prosecution should have came in doing, and they didn't do. You know what I mean? And so that to me was one of the things that I think, if there's going to be a Frank's hearing, it's solely because of that she didn't follow their orders. And when he asked her again in another part, and he's like, where did you get that information or whatever? And then she goes, from my response. And he goes, I was afraid you were going to say that. Like, he was already siding with the prosecution at that point. I think if the prosecution would have just stayed quiet, they probably would have gotten, they probably could have gotten through this a lot easier. But I think because of what the prosecution was saying with Ashley Jennings, and in that moment, I think there's going to end up being a Frank's hearing. Oh boy, the lawyer even told him, send me some dates for it. He's like, I haven't made my decision now, but send me some dates for it. So I think he's at least considering it. I don't think it's going to do anything either way, because their arguments are weak. The argument that of their warrants and why things should be thrown out, it's a super weak case, or weak argument. And the only reason, if they hear it, is solely because of Jennings. I mean, I'll be honest with you. And so, again, I don't think it'll be anything major, but that may have been also why Ashley Jennings didn't speak too much today too. But that's just my speculation. I'm not hearing that from anyone. Thank you, Nina Drew, for your $1.99 super sticker. We appreciate that so much. Okay. Let's see. So she basically needs to do her job, and also has their reports, not just a list of names. Man, I wish I could read my own handwriting. I think I said the purchase of TY, and someone saying it was purchased at this time. Oh, okay. All right. I remember. So she was talking about some expert reports and how that some of them don't have a report. And then the judge shuts her down and says something to the effect like, hey, just because they're pointing out something, like, for instance, and he brings up this analogy, like, if I go buy a TV, and for whatever reason, and this TV was involved in some case like this, somebody going in there and saying, hey, we have a date, we have a receipt here, and this receipt says this date and this time, this purchase, and this was where it was delivered. And he even used the term delivery. So I think this may be the Amazon purchasing. But what he was saying is that, that person that is saying those things doesn't have to be an expert. And I have a great example about this too. So when I was in high school, we're going to go back a very long time ago. um, over 2 decades ago. Dang, I'm outdating myself now, guys. Well, anyways, in high school, my senior year, I didn't really have to go to school. Like I had passed everything. I had my first 3 periods of school um, were airplane mechanics, and it was at a local Air Force base. And we would go out there, we get shuttled out there, we would work on some of the planes or whatever. And then my next period was I was a library aide, and then I had a computer class, and then I was off for lunch, and then I had the rest of the day off on my schedule. The computer class was the only class I needed. My airplane mechanics class, I did that for about half a semester. I kind of liked it, but then it got boring and it wasn't for me. So I just stopped going because I'll be honest, our teacher said, hey, whether you come or not, we don't really care. I'm going to give you an A. You're just not going to get a job in this field if you don't show up. I didn't want a job in that field. And so I didn't show up. Was it wrong? Probably. But, I was 17, 18 years old, right? Well, anywho, library aid, I didn't go for the longest time either. So all I would do is go for my computer class and then take off home because I had lunch and then I was off. I did go to college courses from my junior year and throughout my senior year in the evening. So I was going to other classes. It's just I was taking college courses early. Now, my library aid teacher got upset at me, right? And she was like, because I never showed up. And so she did something with the counselor. The counselor called my mom and said, hey, we're not going to let him walk if he misses another day. And there was like 2 or 3 weeks left in school. And this lady was pity, right? And so I was like, all right, whatever, I'll show up. So I showed up for that class and then computer class, and then I was out. But anyways, I showed up, right? And this was actually before she had made that call. This was I had missed like maybe 2 months, right? And then I showed up one day, and she's like, "Oh, look, it's the missing link." Blah 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 blah. And then she tells me, "Hey, I want you to go out there, and I want you to put the make sure all these books on this one specific aisle were in alphabetical and numerical order." So I said, all right, so I go in there and when I get focused and I start working, I just go boom, boom, boom. So I'm just going, putting everything there, and I get done, right? And I got like 15 minutes left in class or in that period. And I tell her, all right, ma'am, I'm done. And she's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And she begins to argue with me. I was like, look, I went through all of them. And she's like, you put this entire row in alphabetical order and numerical order. And I said, yeah. And I think our class was like 45 minutes. So I did it in 30 minutes. And she was like, are you some sort of expert? And I was like, ma'am, there's a lot of things that a librarian expert can do that I don't know about, but counting and putting things in alphabetical and numerical order aren't something that you need to be an expert for. And she got mad at me. I left, whatever. And then I didn't go to school I didn't go to that class for a long time. And then that's when she got with the counselor, yada, yada, yada. Well, anyways, same thing here. You don't need to be an expert to point at, hey, this purchase was made there and at that time and at this place. You don't need the expert for that. It's ridiculous of some of the things that they had wanted. I hope that wasn't too long of a story, but I'll continue. It's funny though, that librarian lady, she told me one time, she's like, Daniel, you're never going to grow up and be anybody because I didn't show up to library class. Oh man, I pulled her over one time. She was real surprised. I didn't give her a ticket. I wasn't like that. But I gave her a warning. And when I signed it, I put on there from nobody. All right. State says that they are. So yeah, this is what I was talking about. So the judge comes back in with a word of caution to disclose as well, to disclose everything. And that's when he mentions the DNA presentation, to disclose and ask for, if they do, ask for some dates if they do a Frank's hearing. And then that was the end of that. I apologize for that long story in the middle of all that, just to say that. But that's what happened. I digress. So that was the end of today's. Do I think there's going to be a Frank's hearing? I'm going to go ahead and say 75% no, 25% that they may. And if they do, and the reason why I have a 25% they may end up having to do one is because of Ashley's Jennings continually going back into her responses versus into the evidence that they had at the time. And, you know, kind of pushing the hand of Judge Hipler more so than it was anything that the state was, the defense was arguing. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I'll leave that there. Hey, we got a super chat. We got our super sticker. Thank you, King Scarlet News 499 for your super sticker. We appreciate that. Thank you. Now, I saw somebody say something to the effect about Dylan and she lied about something. I don't think she lied about anything. I think what she was saying is she was having a hard time remembering. I mean, there's some people that go to some pretty horrific, traumatic events, and some people like to, they just block things out. Some people don't. Some people remember everything. Some people don't remember anything. You know, she was trying her best from what I understand. And they were pressuring her. They were pressuring her hard, which is why some of that frustration came out of her. Like, I don't know what was real or whatever the case may be. But that's not something that says that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. Like, all of these claims of exculpatory evidence, none of it has been exculpatory. There's been like some of, at best, it's like, hey, there's this, I mean, well, what is it? That there's not a car going down I-95 at 3 o'clock or at 4:48 in the morning. There's no camera pictures of it heading out of Moscow, Idaho from that intersection, even though there's other ways to get around there. Or because when his phone goes off, he's facing a different direction than Moscow, even though he can turn around and do a U-turn or do any one of other routes to get back around within the specific amount of time. Those things aren't exculpatory. What would be exculpatory to me is if, you know, somebody did see his car in the Wildlife Park, or if there was a picture of his car there where he said he was. You know, those things would be exculpatory, but not this. Oh, wrong one. I have both of them up at the same time. My YouTube comments and StreamYard comments, my bad. Somebody asked a question. Let me see. I'm going to go back up. Yeah, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Maybe it's right here. Do you think the judge will suppress anything? No, I don't. You know, there was one thing that she was mentioning that they wanted suppressed. And to me, it didn't make sense. Let me see if I wrote it down. Because it was like, all right, well, they didn't get anything. Oh, so they wanted the suppression of the warrant that showed that Bryan Kohberger was in the area 12 times around. I mean, you know, they're saying that the first warrant shouldn't have given them time for the second warrant, right? That they didn't have enough time to go through it. Well, if you throw out the second warrant, all that is supposedly when he was in and around that neighborhood, you know, connecting to the towers, right? Well, we've already established that he wasn't there. So if you throw that out there, what does it change? You get what I'm saying? What does it change if you throw out that bit of information? That the 12 times he was out there. I mean, if he wasn't already out there, it doesn't make any sense. So to me, I thought that argument was futile, like many others. But I think that's probably it. You know, if I had to say either one or the other, I'd say it'd be that. All righty. Now let's get into the other stuff we came to talk about. and that's this here. So there were some new documents that were just dropped, and we have a stipulation to allow. Let me zoom in real quick. This is a stipulation to allow Zoom access for state witness to testify via Zoom. Court is permitting an out-of-state witness to testify via Zoom at a hearing scheduled to commence on January 23rd, 2025. Well, thus far, at least to our knowledge, there hasn't been anybody that was in a Zoom during the public stuff. Well, maybe there was on the 21st. No, but this is starting on the 23rd. So no, unless there was somebody on Zoom during the earlier times when it was closed. But this is somebody supposed to be testifying from out of state, expert witness. This is an expert witness. All right. And so it's not going to be Dylan or Bethany because they're an expert witness. It's probably not going to be the Kohberger family because they're not an expert at anything. It's probably not going to, well, maybe it could be a confidential informant. I'm going to lean with other if I had to take, if my guess is correct. The court having before stipulated motion to seal exhibits to defendant's stipulation response to request discovery regarding expert witness and good cause appearing now, therefore. All right, it is hereby ordered that exhibits of the defendant's supplemental response to requested discovery regarding expert witnesses shall be filed under seal for the reasons outlined previously. And there's nothing there. And then this is the granted, they granted the out-of-state witness. And I told you guys, I figured it out when they were talking about, let me go back. It was early on when Detective Payne was talking about him arriving in Pennsylvania and being there and what he witnessed while he was in Pennsylvania. And that's when it dawned on me. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And the poll comes in as Bethany at 52, Bethany or Dylan at 52%, the Kohberger family at 20%, confidential informant at 17, and other at 9. We had 260 votes. If I was making a bet, which I only bet when I know I'm going to win, I would say that the witness is going to be a Pennsylvania law enforcement officer that was there either when Bryan Kohberger was arrested. It's probably the detective that was sitting in the back that had the tape recorder with Bryan Kohberger in the car. And I think he was also present during the quote unquote interrogation of Bryan Kohberger's. So if I had to take a guess, it's going to be him. But it's going to be an expert witness and from out of town. You know, some people were guessing Kathleen Ramsland as a state witness. Maybe. I mean, but I don't know if she'd be the state witness at this point. You know what I mean? So I would bet my bottom dollar that it's the detective in Pennsylvania. Let me know what you guys think. I'm pretty sure it's going to be that guy. One of the lead officers involved in BK arrest in Pennsylvania, maybe. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Angel. That's what I'm thinking. That is what I'm thinking. So, you know, I could have just been pretending that I was psychic, but could be one of the forensic guys, FBI forensic guys. It could be true. That's true. Maybe it's balance. But balance isn't out of state. So I think because he was there with the Lori Vallow case, maybe he's somewhere else. I just assumed that he was assigned to Idaho based on the other places that he was at. That's a good possibility. One of the FBI forensic guys. Is the state lab though, where they did all their work? Well, you know what? It could be the. I doubt it's going to be the IGG witnesses for the FBI or anybody forensic from the FBI. They don't want that stuff entered. So I doubt it's going to be any of them. It could be the cast, one of the cast guys, if it was an FBI guy. That could do that. That could be that. Just kind of depends on where they're at. Because balance is there, I think, in Idaho. Patrick says it's crazy. Taylor acknowledged Kohberger was a quarter mile from the crime scene on Ridge Road. I don't think she acknowledged that that's where he was at. What she'd said is there was a vehicle that had the clearest description of the car was the one on Ridge Road. And it was going the wrong way, or whatever the case may be, right? In the wrong direction at the wrong time, whatever the case she was saying. Which is not really going the wrong way. It's just not. That just kind of tells you how manipulative lawyers can be with their words, right? She also said the wrong time, and the prosecution said, no, he was traveling through there, and then 3 minutes later, he's at the King Road residence, which is about 3 minutes, which is about the time it would take to get there. It's hereby order that the out-of-state witness for the hearing scheduled for January 23rd, 2025 are allowed to testify via Zoom. Yeah, but this was a continuation of that hearing, the one today. And I don't know if, it could have been done earlier that day then. The fact that they were also naming the detective then also by name, who had the reporter or the recorder in his pocket, I think is, that's the guy, I would say. They brought him up too. But thank you, Deb. Let's see. What do we think about the footprint? I mean, that one's curious. I don't know. Howard Bloom had mentioned that the crime scenes were closed off to the specific rooms that the bodies were in. That's the only place, right? So in that instance, it kind of points to another thing that he was right about. I don't know what to think about it, to be honest. I would like to see what they're talking about before I start to try to think it's something that is favorable one way or another. At this point, my thoughts on it are I need to see it before I make a decision on that one, because I have no idea. Before, I was fairly confident that it was a print that was leading outside, and I still think that regardless of anything, that's the direction that he walked in and he left. There's other data to prove that, cell phones, testimony by witnesses, the vehicle leaving on camera, those type of things. So you do know that the person had to have left the house. He didn't magically just, transport through the wall or whatever. So, as far as what it could mean, I don't know. I mean, is it possible that, because Vans are pretty common. I thought that one of the reasons why he may wear Vans is because they're slip-on shoes and they have that pattern that could be one of all their types of shoes. Every type of shoe that Vans have, I believe, are all that tread pattern. And it's a very popular shoe. And so it could be anybody. The one thing that they did not argue was that it was not a size 13. I would have assumed that if it was an argument to be won there by the defense, they would have said, the shoe is in a corner, like they mentioned, blatant single one, and it wasn't even the same size. But they didn't mention the size wasn't right. And so, had gloves on, no handprint. Yep. Slipped on Vans, yeah. I have to go back. Is that what she said? I didn't take it that way, but I will be honest. I was listening to it at work. If anybody is listening from work, don't cover your ears. But I may have been listening at work on my off time, And I may have missed something or two. Timestamp that for me if you can, somebody. I'd like to hear it. Next hearing isn't until April 3rd. I'm not sure. But we'll be there for it. I think if they have a Frank's hearing, they're probably going to, he mentioned some dates in 3 weeks, so we may see that soon. Text Salty says, I don't understand how there was only one footprint. I don't either. That's why I was like, I want to see it. Because it's possible that it was from a different time. You know, like somebody had a bloody nose, somebody stepped on it, and they never cleaned it properly. You know, there was a lot of people in that house the night before, which is probably another reason why this house may have been like selected, because of so many people that have gone in and out. You know, Bryan Kohberger probably thought that, hey, there's going to be a lot of people's DNA there. It might be able to cover mine as he goes in and out. Daniel, what do you think about Blum's theory about a possible drug situation? See, Blum didn't have that theory that there was a possible drug situation. Blum said that there was some cops early on in the investigation who thought, could there have been drugs involved in this? And they no longer think that. So I think he also said that maybe one of the witnesses could have been on drugs, and they're going to try to go after her testimony. Well, we heard it today. And it wasn't so much that they were saying that she was on drugs, but they were saying that she was intoxicated by alcohol. And even the term that maybe she thought she could have been dreaming it or hallucinating. So that could be what it is, but I don't think it's anything other than that. Okay. Connor says that Vans aren't murder shoes. I mean, any shoe, anybody can kill somebody in any type of footwear. And you don't wear it because it's tactical or because it's going to help you. You wear it because it's going to fit in. It's a common shoe. It's not something that could be tracked back. I think about the JonBenet case, JonBenet Ramsey case. There was a footprint with a high-tech or high-trek footprint outside. That's not a very common shoe. And you based on pattern and a bunch of other things, you can determine on a lot of like they were able to determine that this specific pattern came from a specific type of shoe, had to be this color and this, that, and the third. And it kind of pointed back to Burke's shoe, but I digress on that part. But if you have a common shoe, it's harder to trace it back. And so it's not so much for the comfort or the ability to do something, it's for other stuff. Then you can search the transcript with keywords to find things. Oh, yeah, that's right. You put that up there. I'm going to go look for it. I don't want to do that on the show itself, but I'm going to look for it afterwards. Thank you. Let's see. Footprints outside Dylan's door could be from a trip coming down from third floor or coming from Xana's room. More than one possible direction for the footprint. That's true. Sam goes, my question is, if there's a drug angle, how does that exclude Kohberger? A lot of pro-burgers claim since there's a drug angle, Kohberger is somehow innocent. I ask how. That's true. He is the one guy that we do know out of everybody that's involved in this that has had a drug problem. If there's one person who's had a drug problem out of all the folks that we know about, it's Bryan Kohberger. And if it was also, you know, when it talks about the strength of the type of drug it is, it's Bryan Kohberger. Let's see. All right, this dude's gone. Don't worry about that, Sally. I took care of that jerk off. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that I think that if it was a drug case, that was that's some drug theory that Bloom threw out there was, either that the girls may have been the surviving victims, one or both, may have been consuming something that night, maybe marijuana or whatever the case may be, and that the defense is going to try to attack that. And we've seen somewhat of it, but it was the alcohol. But yeah, none of the things that they have been saying doesn't exclude Kohberger. You know, it's just ridiculous. That's my psychic prediction. That's funny. I see that. All righty, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me tonight. I appreciate everybody that was tuning in. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I'll be back on here maybe Sunday. I'm not sure. I'm still working out the details, but Sunday we're looking at having a couple, at least hopefully 2 special guests on the show to give in their expertise on a certain topic. I don't want to divulge too much into it, so make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. That way you're notified when we go live on Sunday. If we go live on Sunday, I can't guarantee it's going to be this Sunday and maybe the next. But and I appreciate everybody with the great comments. I mean, I appreciate you guys saying that. Thank you so much. And I am going to also re-listen to the hearing as well. Appreciate everybody. Thank you guys so much. You guys are the reason why the show continues. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll be here probably Sunday night. And if my guests they're kind of busy, and right now they're doing a lot, and I just rather wait until I for sure know that they're going to be able to get on before I disclose who they are and what they can bring to the table. And so with that being said, guys, y'all have a great night. Until next time, peace.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, sleuths of the night. Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing.